G'day there, my name is James Baldwin and welcome to another episode of Extreme E's official podcast, Off Track. In this episode, we chat with the newly announced Veloce Racing driver, but formerly Excite Energy Racing's Christine GZ. And I'm joined, as always, after an international trip together, it's good to say, my friend and yours, Michael Amonato. G'day, mate.
Hello, mate. Yes, we've got a series of podcasts, don't we? All recorded at one place at one time. They are dating by the day, naturally enough. But this one in particular, because what we don't cover in our chat with Christine GZ is, of course, in the intervening time, she is switching teams away from Excite Energy and over to Veloce, where she's replacing Jamie Chadwick. Very exciting news for her. Big announcement for her, which means there's a whole lot more on the horizon in 2022.
Yeah, she is an incredible person. As you'll hear in this chat, we could have gone for hours and hours and hours. And as she suggested, this is just probably part one of what will be another part of a podcast at some point later in 2022 or 2023.
Yes.
But an incredible announcement. Yep, very, very happy for her indeed. She definitely deserves it. And she's certainly worked incredibly hard at forging her own path, Michael, to get to this position.
That really is the theme of the podcast, if you like. She has continues to work so hard to make motorsport her dream reality. Incredible as well to think, as you'll hear, that for a lot of her early life, in fact, now if I quickly do some maths, maybe even the majority of her life so far, didn't even know what motorsport was, but knew she loved it and really wanted to make it happen. And she's done some really wacky things to make it happen. Incredible that all those roads, James, led to her talking to us, really, didn't it? Isn't that the moral of the story? That try as much as you can, as much as you like. You cannot avoid the Extreme E podcast. Sitting in a trailer in the mud.
There it is. I was waiting for the mud to be announced. Everyone said, so how was your trip? Mud.
Yes, it was muddy. It was muddy. Wherever it was, Bovington.
Yes.
It feels so long ago now. That's where it led to. That's where her motorsport career's led to. A high point, I think it's fair to say, in her career. Not to be topped by anything else. And it was a great chat. It really was a great chat. In fact, it was so good, we barely managed to get to her Extreme E career. That was right at the end. And we were running out of time when we talked about it, but we absolutely hit on all of those major notes. But a really enjoyable hour with Christine.
Yeah, look, I am really looking forward to listening to this myself. So let's get into it, Michael. This is our chat with now Veloce Racing's Christine GZ. Christine GZ. G'day, mate. How you doing?
Hello, chicos. Great. And you? You look
doing
good.
well. I got to get in the g'day as much as I can. We're here recording at the Jurassic X Prix in the warmth. You're welcome. You've just discovered this trailer.
Thank God it's freezing.
Christine, look, I want to take you all the way back to the very, very beginning of your story because you've been incredibly quick all weekend, and we were just saying that before we started recording, and we've loved watching you in the car. But I'd love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better and how you got to this point. So take us back to very, very young Christine GZ. What was the situation? What was going through your mind about motorsport, if anything at all?
This is going to be a long story. Do you have time?
Yes, let's do it. Strap in, everyone.
Okay, so how else started? Let me think. Okay, so I was 17 and I was living in Fuerteventura. And I really loved cars, but in my family, no one gave a crap, basically. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so all of a sudden, there's this Corolla from 1989 that just passes by my house. And I was like, huh? What's that? So I started running out, okay. And I just saw it, rushing through, and I'm like, what is that? I didn't even know what was a rally car, you know? Mm-hmm. So I went back home, and I started thinking, and I'm like, okay, I might have to get back out every day and check if the car comes again. So after a week, the car passed again. And I was like, I need to do something now. So I jumped in the middle of the road, and he almost ran me over, but he didn't. So kids don't do that. And he was like, and then, Canarians are it's like Spanish, but like gangsta version, okay? Mm-hmm. So the co-driver came out and he was like, what are you doing? And, I'm not saying the bad words, and I'll try. and I was like, hi, sorry, can I get in the car? And he was like, what? And I'm like, please. So he just turns around and goes to the driver. Crazy blonde chick wants to get in the car. and the driver, he was the most, my opposite, okay? Most antisocial, tranquilo. And he was looking at him like, okay. And I'm like, yay. I had no shoes. I was like super hippie, you know, typical hippie surfer that lives in Fuerteventura.
Yeah.
And I just like ran in the car. I had even my dog following me. I didn't even like, and the guy was like, where's your shoes? And I'm like, I don't know. And then he was like, and what about your dog? I'm like, which dog? I was like so excited. I just forgot about everything. And so I was in the car, and then he didn't do anything special. He just like went down the hill, pulled the hydraulic handbrake, the car, and I'm just like, you know, and like your head just goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
And my chip just went poof. And since that moment, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I don't know what this is, but this is what I want to do.
Wow.
So I kind of started off like that, and then the whole story comes.
Did you have any? So you had no concept of motorsport even before that? Because how old were you when this was happening?
I was 17, and no, before that I just had like a lot of posters in the house, and like, you know, guests would come in the house and be like to my mom, "Oh, you have a son?" And she was like, "Yes, Cristino." You know, that's all I like. And then my mom told me that when I was a kid, they would give me like these Barbies, and I'll be like, ah, and like take off the necks and shit. And so I'd be like, "I want tractors," and they were like, "Okay."
So what was 17-year-old GZ doing before she discovered motorsport? Like, what was the direction happening before you discovered this car?
Well, I was studying, so I was I didn't really know. Like, I liked cars, but it wasn't a thing. I just, you know, I loved sports. I lived in Tenerife too. I lived in India. I lived in Italy. So I was like all over the place. I was just following the flow. My parents just separated. So we were in this new island, and I was like, all I like to do is surf. And I was working in a ice cream shop in the morning and in a bar at night. So like the afternoon was the only time I had free. So when all this started, it was like crazy insane.
So where do you start when you don't know anything about motorsport? You've just discovered being in a car. How do you possibly take the next step only having just discovered it?
Okay, this is the fun bit, okay? Okay, so basically what happened is when I got off the Corolla, I was like so excited, you know, and I was just like talking all the time, and this antisocial guy was like looking at me like, oh my god, this chick is crazy. And I'm like, please, can I come and see the car? And he was like, okay. And I'm just like, please, can I come and see the car in the afternoons? Like, I'm free, I can come. And he was just like, just looking at me and like, no. Like, he was super worried, you know? And so what I did was like, oh, okay. So I just left. I went back home, and then, you know, my head was like spinning all over the place. So I started thinking, and then I'm like, I just looked online. What is a rally car? And I started reading like rally cars, performance, and then it said that they can't circulate on like normal roads. So I started thinking, like a stalker. Okay, so that means that this car and the guy live near, because if they were on my main road, it means that it's illegal, right? So he can't live that far. He wouldn't be that crazy. So I'm like, I'll just go for a walk. So I started going for a walk, and basically I just, after like a kilometer that I was walking, I looked to my left and I see this garage half open with the ass of the Corolla. And I'm like, that's my car. But, you know, there was a gate and everything, so I kind of just jumped in.
Is it fair to say that Corolla now, obviously it's a great memory. Do you still love Corollas? Because I drive a Corolla, not a rally car, and I love my Corolla. I don't know if it's a Corolla thing. Do people love them?
Yeah, I love it. I don't know. That's really cool. I mean, do you remember Carlos Sainz when we raced the Corolla in the World Championship? That was amazing. It was beautiful. It wasn't that model, though. It was A92, but yeah. I don't know. I think it was just... It could have been probably a Opel Corsa, you know, but it's just it's just the first car I saw, so I was like, love of my life forever.
So that was 2010 then, roughly, if my maths is correct. So you've had this experience seeing the car. Then what was the next step in terms of looking at the world of motorsport? Because in 2010, of course, WRC was still quite a lot bigger than it is now. I know Formula One is the biggest thing. Of course, now Extreme E here as well is pretty big too. What were the things that you looked towards as sort of a mentorship in terms of, I want to achieve this? You said you had posters on the wall, but was there someone that you really looked up to?
Yeah, of course, Sebastian Loeb.
Yeah.
He was my idol. And also he started late, you know, like he was a gymnast before. So for me, it's been like a real inspiration, because I was like, okay, he can do it. Like, I want to do that. So it kind of like, yeah, I did stalk this guy and his car. And then eventually I got in the house of him, and I was like, please just let me come and stay in here and just watch the car meanwhile you work on it. And he was like, you're weird. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I get that often. So I just started going all the afternoons until one day I was like, Danny, and, you know, he would give me jobs like, okay, change the tire, do this, do that. And I was like, yeah, okay. No idea. I just got all the tools. Like, yeah. Like, yeah. Screwdriver, for sure. Change a tire, screwdriver. And then one day I was like, Danny, he was like, what? I want to be a race car driver too. And he was like, are you rich? And I'm like, no, I work in a bar and an ice cream shop. And he was like, well, then good luck. And I'm like, but come on, you race a Corolla and you're not rich. And he was like, yeah, but I'm a mechanic. So in that moment, my head like started spinning like, okay, so if you're a mechanic, you can race. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to become a mechanic. So that's what happened. I started studying and I kind of became a mechanic. And I bought a chassis of a Golf MK2 from a scrapyard.
Yeah.
And the next day I started working on it, and he gave me a piece of his land and he was like, you can put your chassis there and work on it. So I started working on the car there, and it took like a year, and then we built it. So
one of the questions at the Legacy project that we had a couple of days ago, and we'll talk about building beaver houses in just a little bit. But one of the school kids who were there asked, what's it like building a rally car? And I think that's probably a good question to ask you again here. And as you said, it took over a year. But when you've got a chassis and you're learning to be a mechanic, and I'm sure your parents were absolutely stoked about that. I was like, that ties
that's
in.
another story.
But what's the step? What's the first process then? You've got a chassis from a junkyard. Where do you look first? Is it the motor that you're then looking for?
Yeah, I mean, thank God Danny was like an expert, so he helped me a lot. He would work all day, so he would give me like jobs, like, okay, and today you go and find an engine, and then you buy this, and then you do that, and then you learn to weld. So I would be like, how the heck do I learn to weld? So I had all these old neighbors, that they would just sit outside of their house and chat about their life and this and that, typical granny style. So I would go there and I'd be like, hi, can someone weld? And they're like, yeah, he was a great welder when he was over. And I was like, oh, perfect, can you teach me? And he was like, yeah, little blondie, what you want to learn? So I would be there like all day with all these people teaching me to weld. I was yay! So the whole like little village where I lived in, they were all like part of this project. So it was super cool. I don't know. I just started like reading a lot. I read a lot like of books of Amazon and stuff. How to become a mechanic? How to learn to mechanic? It was really funny. And I bought this. I bought the the roll cage, and then. That wasn't very safe because we welded ourselves. But eventually we did let someone do it. And yeah, it's just step by step, But it was really cool because I think at that time I had no idea that motorsport was so hard and about the budget and all this. I mean, right now we're talking about budgets that are not even at that time, like for me, my car was $1,000 in total. And I was like, whoa. $1,000. It's like 3 months pay, So it was, I don't know, it was a good time.
What's it like building this car then? You've got it to the first event. How's your confidence? Because you don't want to punt it straight into a tree because that would undo all of the hard work that you've just put in.
Yeah, the first race was horrible actually. And it was like, when you don't even know how to alinear, how do you say
align the wheel. Alignment, yeah.
So it was like all floppy sideways.
Oh,
and I would be like, I would be so proud, like me and my golf. and like the painting, I did the painting with like, those little like guns to spray with?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I bought that and I thought that I could paint a car with that. And I did, I can show you pictures and it's like, it was horrendous. It was like orange, white, purple. It was like nonsense at all. But I was like so proud. Like, yeah, I'm spraying this. I'm doing it. And I was like, yeah.
That's like looking at the Excite Energy can. Probably, by the way.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
It is, exactly. Yeah. And then eventually I sold the Golf because there was actually a guy that was a collectionist and he really wanted a Golf of like rally and he didn't have it. And of course it was crap, my car. It cost me like $1,000, but the guy was like, I'll give you more. And I'm just like, no. It took me a year. I'm never going to sell this. And after like 4 times that he was like, okay, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. I'm like, okay, when are you picking it up? And then I sold it and like instantly I went to search for a chassis of the Corolla that I saw the first time.
Right.
Because I'm like, that's what I want. And I found a chassis with already some suspension, like dampers for rally. So it was a little bit like an upgrade and I'm just like, oh, that's perfect. It's my one.
I'm interested because we often talk to drivers and, when they first enter their race, they find normally they've got a little bit of instinct for it. But I want to go back to that idea of being a mechanic. You have to read a lot about it, obviously. I don't think anyone naturally is a mechanic, obviously, from birth. Did you find the mechanical side of things came naturally to you? Do you think you have like a bit of an engineer's brain?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I really don't think so. I think it's because I loved it so much. I was so passionate about it and I knew that like I really wanted to get there that it just came, okay, I have to do it. This is what I don't know. I have no idea how you weld, but I'm going to learn because I want to build my car. So it was kind of
behind the wheel though then, because that is make or break when you start your first race. We've talked about your first race, of course, but how did that feel once you finally first drove your own car? Was there a feeling that was going to be the right thing to do? Once you've done all that thinking, you'd built the car, the engineering of it. Did you know that was going to be a thing for you from that moment?
Yeah, for sure. I just continued like straight there. When you have like obstacles and you're just like, no. Yeah, for sure.
And so was anyone instructing you, teaching you to the driving as well? Was that something, or was it something you kind of taught yourself to do?
Yeah, kind of autodidacta, I think. That's why I was so bad. But and I mean, my first race was when I was 19. So it took me 2 years to really, end the whole thing. And then I went to England. Well, I came to England. Sorry, we're here right now. So it was a long journey.
What's it like then? So you're teaching yourself basically everything. Talk us about how you got then to a professional event where there's actually something on the lines, a proper championship. Was it hard to either convince people, or were you trying to find sponsors to get into this event? Because I know plenty of people would probably like to build a rally car and have a crack, and maybe don't just jump in the way of a Toyota Corolla AE92. That's probably not advisable, as you said. But there's a lot in the middle, because we know, and we've spoken to other drivers here as well, and especially female drivers, it just seems to be a lot harder initially, and especially that sort of mid-2010 point, to convince anyone really to help you out.
Yeah, and like I said before, even more when you don't know what you're doing. Like right now, I could create a deck, I could explain someone what I'm doing, what I want to do. At that time, I was like some random girl that suddenly fell in love with this and wanted to do racing. And it's like, okay, but what's racing? I didn't know what was the Canarian Championship, all this. So I had to really like all in. And I mean, like I said before, at the beginning, my mom didn't even know that I was prepping the car. She thought that I was playing beach volleyball, and like after 3 months, I was like, damn it, like I'm never at home, like in the morning I'm working, in the afternoon I'm with the car, and then one day I just came home and she was like crying, super Italian. She was like, oh, Cristina, non capisco. And I'm just like, oh God, how am I going to explain her I'm not actually playing beach volleyball? So yeah, it was kind of complicated. And then, like you said, when I was like, okay, now I know what I want to do. I want to do the whole the Canarian Championship, because that was like, let's say my nearest step. I was like super excited, and I went with a like doc that I made on Word. All right. And that's it. And some pictures that I printed of me prepping the car. And I went and I started like knocking on the little shops that I knew from Fuerteventura. And Fuerteventura, it's a tiny island, you don't have like big businesses. So I went in, the first one was Italian products. And it was like Johnny's house, So I went in, I knocked, and I'm like, hi, so I want to be world champion. And and the guy was like looking at me like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, you're Italian, we should support Italians. And the guy was like, so what you want? And I'm like, okay, so this is my race car, and I need money to prep it. And then and the guy was just looking, and he said, listen, I don't have money, but I have mozzarellas. So I looked at him and I said, deal. And I thought, you know what? I'll think about it later. and then I was like, okay, what the heck am I going to do with mozzarella? And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to sell mozzarella for the cause. So I started selling mozzarella, like, I don't know, €5 one mozzarella, but just so that people could help it's like a crowdfunding, but in exchange you have the mozzarella instead of nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was really cool, and that's how I made my first sponsor. And then, slowly went up. But then, like, a lot of things happened. Like, for example, I went to because I thought, you know what? The championship on the islands, the problem is transporting the cars through the islands, it's really expensive. So I thought, there's a company, Naviera Armas, which is like the boat that goes to the islands. So I'm like, if I go to them and I tell them that I want to race, maybe they sponsor me, So I literally just went to the office, and I came in and I said, hi, can I talk to the manager? And they're all looking at me like, hello. Sure, you can sit here. And this super nice lady, she was like, you can tell me, and then I will talk to the manager about it. And I'm like, okay. And I started with my little papers, my little pictures. So this is what I want to do. I'm going to race the championship, but I need help to move the car on all over the islands. And the girl was like, okay, well, that's a very interesting project. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be world champion. So, and she was like, okay, that's cool. And I'm like, yeah, this is my car, I built it. And she was like, oh, beautiful, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, imagine it all Naviera Armas is going to be very nice. And she was like, okay. And then all of a sudden she's like, so how do you think you're going to transport the car through the islands? And I'm like, yeah, with your boat. And they're like, yeah, but how are you putting a road rally car in the boat? You know what I mean? Like, you have to transport it from the... And I was just sitting there looking at this lady thinking, she's right. I have no idea. So I'm like, I started thinking. And the lady was like, all good? You're fine? I'm like, I will be back in 2 weeks. And I left. And I went home and I opened the page. It's called it's like Auto Scout 24. I don't know if you know. It's like where they sell used cars. And I started looking. Tow trucks on sale. Okay, and all of a sudden there was one like $1,200.
Oh.
It was in Salamanca. Okay, but by the way, Canary Islands, it's like very far. Okay, to get to mainland Spain, it's 33 hours or 36 hours in a boat.
Wow.
So it's not near. Okay. So anyway, Salamanca, it's half in Spain. So anyway, I see this tow truck, $1,200. It was 1960 something. Like is a Nissan Trade. So like the planchas that you pull down to put the car on. They were like I don't know tons heavy. You had to like pull it in by hand and everything. And it had like. And like 20 kilometers per hour was the fastest that it could do, no? And it had 500,000 kilometers.
Oh,
wow. Beautiful. I was like, this is art. So I text the guy and I'm like, hey, I really like your tow truck. Can I buy it? And he was like, do you have a license for tow truck? I'm like, please, I'm a tow trucker. Come on. And he was like, oh, okay, well, nice to meet you, Chris. I'll see you here. Perfect. I'll come. And I started looking. Okay, so I had a RAV4. So I drove my RAV4 from Fuerteventura to Lanzarote, from Lanzarote to Gran Canaria. Gran Canaria, I got the boat of 33 hours to the south, Cadiz. And then from there, I drove like 7 hours to the tow truck guy. I got there, and then I'm like, ha! And he was like, oh, you're a girl. And I'm like, excuse me? And so he was like, oh, okay, well, are you sure this thing has 500,000 kilometers? Where are you bringing it? I'm like, oh, Canary Islands. And he was like, okay. So I just put my RAV4 on top of it. And I'm like, all this, by the way, was a travel that I could not afford myself. So I was like, there was a guy that wanted, the Danny chick, he wanted a Subaru from Santander, which is, Salamanca is here, Cadiz is here, and Santander is up here. Okay, so it's like 15 hours drive, okay? So I'm like, haha. I'll pick up your stuff if you pay me the travel to go. And he was like, how are you picking up? This is not important. Yeah. I will pick up your car. You pay me the travel. And he was like, sure. So it was like all sponsored, Yeah. And basically we went up to Santander, got the Subaru, and then realized there's one extra car. You know what I mean? Like the RAV4 on top of the tow truck.
Yes.
Where am I going to put the Subaru? Couldn't leave the Subaru because the Subaru was the point of the travel. So I'm like, So I put a huge sticker on my RAV4. Buy me, I'm pretty. And I started running around the city with the car. After like 3 days, we sold it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 3 days of just driving around, and eventually someone picked up the phone.
I know, it was crazy. And it was so funny because then drove all the way back 40 kilometers per hour because you remember downhill it would go 40. Like, all the way down. And then, Cadiz, Anyway, long story. A lot of stuff happened in that scene. Maybe next podcast because that was going to be too long. And then I came back to Fuerteventura. And you had to see the face of my mom when I arrived home, and she was like, what is this scrapyard thing? And I'm like, hey, she's called Gufito and she's my tow truck. And she was like, Christine, no. Christine, where's the RAV4? I'm like, listen, this is a long story, Mom. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Oh my God, it was hilarious. So I took off all the grease from the tow truck. I made it really nice, and I put all the stickers of Naviera on top. And I went back to the company of the boat place. And I went back with the tow truck and the race car on top. And I entered there and I'm like, hi, I'm back. And she was like, oh, you're really back after 2 weeks? I'm like, I told you. And I was like, I got the transport. And she's like, you got the what? I'm like, yeah, come outside. So she like walks out and looks at this like crappy old tow truck, I'll show you photos of that.
Sure, looking forward to that.
And she was like, what is this? I'm like, this is my transport. Are you going to sponsor me? Can I talk to the manager? And she was like, you know what? And she gives me the hand like this in a shake. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I'm the manager and you're sponsored. And I was like, yeah! So happy. So yeah, all started like that.
You just can't write this stuff, can you?
What a great twist. What an awesome twist.
Netflix.
Yes. So when did there's a lot I want to unpack from that, actually. I've got questions. When did you tell your parents about this? You were doing this in secret for a while, is that right?
Yeah. A few months later, I was coming home all dirty. I was never at home. So when she was like crying in the sofa, kind of, I mean, not crying, but she was like, I'm like, yeah, Mom, I'm going to have to tell you. And she's like, oh. I think she thought that I was in drugs. So when I told her I want to become a race car driver, it was kind of, what?
Yeah.
But it was just so random, It was like, she's like, well, how are you going to do that? Like, how are you going to pay that? How does it work? It was just, and I'm like, I don't know. This is what I want to do.
So you didn't have to be sold too hard on it, because often racing parents, unless they are racing parents, they don't necessarily like people getting involved in racing?
So my parents were separated, so I only lived with my mom. So clearly, I told her, and she was like, whatever. She just thought that it was like a moment, you know. I mean, she knew that in September I had to go study because that was the deal she had with my dad. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go study, and that's it. And she thought, well, as soon as she leaves, she's gonna forget about this thing, this little game she has on. Because the tow truck thing is after I came back from study. So in the meanwhile, what happened is I went to Prague to study. I got to Prague and I took a ticket to Italy to get a rally license because I'm like, there's no freaking way I'm gonna go to university and study business management in Prague. Okay, so all this, she was at home thinking I was studying, and she was like, proud little mama. And then university sends an email like, hey, your daughter never came. So, you know, it's like she went through a lot, I think, with me. Only child, kind of worse, you know. And I think that at the end, so many things happened. Like I rolled my RAV4 after a week of having it. The thing that I escaped from the uni, and then I came back, and then she was like so over me, like really. When I came back, she was like, Christine, I don't know what to do with you. Like, you're crazy, and you have to study. You have to go to university. We spoke about this. She was crazy, you know. And I'm just like, Mom, this is what I don't want to do that. I want to become a race car driver. And she was like, yeah, but you have to study. So I was like, okay, let's make a deal.
Very good at making deals, is what I've discovered.
So basically, I told her, okay, let's do this. Give me one more year, sabbatical, no? I will finish my race car, because this, I didn't even finish the Corolla, not the Corolla, the Golf at this time. So this was the beginning. And then I promised next year I'll go to study. And she was like, okay, but you're sponsoring your own thing. I'm like, yeah, me and my ice cream and, you know, and my bar, everything's going to be all right. Wasn't even earning like 400 bucks. I don't know. So basically we did this deal. We signed it on a, you know, little towel. And so I took the whole year to finish the car. That's why I took like a year and a half too. And then from there it was time to go to England to study. Because then I changed my plan. I wasn't going to go to Prague again. And it was like, no. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go to England, to the only city I haven't never visited in my life, which was Birmingham. And that was not right. And I went to study again, like was business management and marketing or something like that, you know. And I was so miserable. Like, you know, every day waking up doing something that you hate. It was just not the thing. And so it just happened that eventually, a friend from Australia, actually.
Oh, really?
Beautiful.
Yes.
Always a good
You're
Australian
welcome.
story. Yes.
There you go.
We've got to get cut into deals now, right? Like, it's a matter of pride.
Yeah. He called me and he was like, girl, 2 a.m., okay? He's as excited as me and hyperactive. You need to check if I want to do Erasmus in your university. I'm like, no, don't come. No, don't. This is bad. And he was like, no, but I really want to do Erasmus there. And can you search for a course in your uni and then I'll just pick it? And I was like, I'm like, it's 2 a.m. He was like, you never sleep. And I'm like, whatever. Like, so I put down the phone and I'm just like, gosh, this guy. And I just went back to sleep. I tried. And then I'm like, fine, I'll just open my laptop. So I opened it, I started looking through, and suddenly I see like Birmingham University, blah, 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 all this information, and then motorsport engineering. I'm like, huh? Oh. Okay. So I started like clicking, and then it said, preparing race cars, and it was just like, oh, what is this? This is destiny. And I was like, haha. So I get it, and I just start like, hello, my name is Chris, and I really would like to change course. And the guy, the tutor, responded the next morning like, oh, of course, Chris, come over and check out the course and whatever, the class and etc. And I arrived there, and I was dressed up like me, you know, like it's summer all over the world every time. And I got there, and I was like, I see this guy in a tie, and I'm like, yeah, that's my man. So I'm like, hello? And he just looks at me like, and he's like, please, I have a meeting, I'm sorry. And I'm like, I'm your meeting. and he's like, no, I'm expecting Christopher. I'm like, nah, Christine. He was like, but the email said Chris. And I'm like, yeah, Chris is me. And he was just like, well, we don't have females in our course. And I'm like, and now you do, baby. So it just happened like that. And I changed course. And again, I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll tell my mom later. So like after 3 weeks, you know, I'm like, she was like so proud, mama, you know, like, oh, my darling, I'm so happy that finally you're studying, everything's going all right. And I'm just like, okay, I have to tell her. And she was like, what are you doing today? I'm like, taxes of Japan. She's like, oh, business, interesting course. I was like, yeah, I'll tell her. So I called her and I said, Mom, we need to talk. And she's like, oh, you're in jail. I'm like, haha, nope. There you go. But perfect, no?
Yeah, like she really expects the worst, doesn't she?
Yeah, she knows
well
me.
Done.
Jail is another story, by the way. Anyway, so
It's the third podcast.
50, number 52. Anyway, yeah. So I told her, and I could feel her shouting from my room in the kitchen, you know. And I left the phone, and she was, and then I was like, okay, whatever. She'll get over it. And after 2 weeks, you know, she called me back without talking, and she was like, Christine, I understand that this is what you like. This is your life. I now got it. I am over trying, so I will support you. And I was like, yeah. And that's where it all started.
Wow. How was...
And she actually came to the first race with me in the tow truck.
Oh,
Did
wow.
she?
Yeah, it was so hilarious because she's like the opposite of me. Okay, Mom, when you listen this, I love you, just so you know. And she was like super nicely, just like, you know, typical white with her all stars and so cute. And I'm just like, truck driver. And she would come in the tow truck and be like, how do I get in? Because, you know, it's so tall. And I'm like, come on, Mom, jump. And she was like, ugh. And then, you know, I would stop for gas and like people would like be like, hi. Like two blondes in a tow truck, you know, 1960 something. And my mom was like, oh, hi. She's like, you have so many friends. I'm like, Mom, I don't know them. And she's like, oh, okay, hi. So it's really funny. Nice time.
Let's talk about the success that you started having then, because, I mean, in 2014, it obviously went pretty well for you. Home-built rally car, which is incredible, and also front-wheel drive rally car as well. And I know that, and if Andrew Coley listens to this, who's the lead commentator, he will always very quickly say, there's nothing wrong with front-wheel drive. All right, Andrew, I get it. You don't have to shout at me. But it's an interesting way of learning to drive. So 2014, talk us about the championship that you then won in your class, but also what it was like driving a front-wheel drive car and then eventually driving something different and how that sort of affected how you learnt, I suppose.
Okay, well, I think I drove front-wheel drive for a long time because all I was doing was rally, so I passed from that to a R2, so it was kind of always front-wheel drive. So for me, it was normal until I just got to the US with crazy jumps and stuff. But yeah, it was amazing because obviously I was still studying in the UK, and every weekend I would fly back and like work on the car, and then fly back the next weekend and work, and then fly back and then race, and then it was very hectic. And like my classroom, everyone helped me so much, and my tutor also, you know, because it was like they knew that I was like all over. And that year we won it, so it was amazing because we won overall, like men and women, and that was like super cool, and that never happened before, and it was amazing. And then like they called me from mainland Barcelona, and they said, hey, we just realized that you won the championship in Canary Islands. I was like, okay. And at that time I came back from university, and I opened a mechanic workshop, a really tiny one.
Wow.
So I was like working in the workshop, and in the night I would put my car in and I would work on my car. And it was super cool because when they called me, they're like, yeah, so we would like to invite you to try our R2. Like for me, an R2 was like, wow,
yeah,
I am the winner. And I was so happy. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, then perfect, let's organize it. And, you know, we were thinking about a project of racing like Spanish championship in one of the WRC events. And I mean, yeah, are you interested? I'm like, yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, I sold everything. I sold my own workshop, I sold my car, I sold clothes, I sold everything I had, and I just left for Barcelona with a bag.
That is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and then all my life started going on and on.
Still going on. What was it like to transition to that phase where, so at the beginning, obviously, and you're still at the stage now where you're selling a lot of things to keep the career going. When things started to get a little bit less difficult, when things started to click for you, was there a moment you realised that it was working out? That you didn't have to start selling clothes and asking for mozzarella for free and that kind of stuff?
I don't know. I think I'm still working on it. You know, it's like I still live in the same like immigrant flat with no window when I got to Barcelona 5 years ago, and I'm still kind of like. Obviously, things are going better because, you know, you find your way out, and I love to work and do stuff. So I work with Porsche as driver instructor, and then I work with Mediaset, and then I do everything that I can just to race. But I don't know, when I got contracted by the US, that was for me like super achievement. Like, oh my God, I'm actually a driver now. Like this is, I can work as this, you know? So that was really cool. But then of course you know, there's a lot of things going on. So for me, it's always been like, okay, next. And then, but it's cool. It's clicking in slowly.
Because it strikes me, you want to be a world champion. You want to be a world champion, in fact. But it strikes me, did you ever have like a pathway in mind? Because it seems like you, and I think this is absolutely to your credit, just say yes to a lot of things, just keep moving. Is that the case, or is there still a line in your mind, the direction you need to go in?
I think the line is getting more clear now. At the beginning, of course not. Like, I had no idea, and I just didn't know what I was getting into. So I was literally, all I wanted to do was drive. So let's say, I don't know, for example, with the guy of the workshop, I was like, okay, if I come and like help you clean here, then you can let me in my car, and then you can go for 2 laps. Okay. So it was all like every time just, find the way. And then like what happened in Barcelona, for example, we did with this Mavisa, we raced all female team, mechanics, coordinators, engineers, everything. It was super cool, like new project. We did the Spanish Championship of Gravel. We won that, which was our aim. And then we did one of the WRC events, the Barcelona one, which was incredible. But again, it wasn't, so he was like, okay, I'm going to give you the car. Peugeot is giving you the car and everything, but then the money of the insurance, of the inscription, and of your costs is on you. So we're talking about me finding sponsors with mozzarella, going suddenly to Spain, living in a garage, because I was living in the mechanic's garage at the beginning, and trying to pay $2,000 per race, which for me was like, you know what I mean? Like, I get that the event costs 15, but for me 2,000 was like a crazy amount. So it's always been like a kind of struggle, but I think that slowly you understand what's going on, and you. But for sure, there's always, I give you this and I do this, in exchange. Like, there's always a.
Do you get stressed? Because you seem like everything seems great. Like you always manage to work things out. Do you have moments where it seems like you're worried things might not work out?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, everyone has that. I had a lot of moments for like before more, because when I moved to Barcelona, and then when we raced all this championship, we won it, and then we did the WRC, and they came back to me saying, okay, Peugeot is super happy. They're still sponsoring for next year. Everything's going to be amazing, but it's the same deal. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. So if it's the same deal, it means I still have to pay my expenses, this and this and this. But now we raced 4 events. Now you're telling me we're doing 10 events. So I basically have to find around about 20K right now. For me, it was like, what? Like in my account, I had 600 euros, So it's just, it was so much that I was just like, okay, I will never get there. It's been, I don't know, 4 years that I've been non-stop, and I'm still here living in a garage, or when I moved to the flat, like a destroyed flat, sharing the room with people, and you're still there. So it's like, oh, it's never gonna happen. So from there, I stopped. I said, no, I can't do it. It was the first time that I said no, because I would have gone towards anything, but at that time I was 21 or something. I'm like, okay, Christine, relax. You've done a lot, and you need to think. And because also for the last event, for the WRC, I had to do a crowdfunding to find the money to race it.
Right.
Wow.
So it was just like, it was a lot of work, and still you have nothing. You're still there doing nothing. You're no one. So it's like, okay. And, we didn't have training, coaches, or budget for it. So everything was just like, okay, tomorrow you're racing, bye. And then you get there, you race, and you're never gonna, succeed, let's say like this, if it's all random. So then for the next year, I was like, okay, I'm going to start working, like get money apart, and then I'll see what I can do.
And I mean, it's certainly working out now. It's interesting because, and this is particularly the case, admittedly, with single-seater racing, but it's the case with all motorsport now. It's super expensive. Like, it is a rich person's sport. Like at the beginning of your story, the first question was, how much money do you have?
Yeah.
What can motorsport do to make that more accessible? Because clearly you're working very hard and extremely talented and you're making it, but it's been incredibly difficult, much more difficult than it is for someone who came from a wealthy background. Motorsport must be missing out on so many other talented people who either don't have the drive or just don't have that lucky opportunity that keeps them going. Yeah. What can motorsport do to help that along?
I mean, I feel that, for example, in the US, when I raced over there, the sponsors were like way different, like how they came along, how, like for example, Baja 1000, you have the whole day before that, the whole city is with stands of the sponsors. People walk through, you stop, you talk, you move, the car goes through, you just push it, the people come, sit in it. I think for example, in the WRC, we're missing a little bit of the show, which I understand. Like, I'm a driver. I just want to drive. I don't care about the show, but I can do both. You know what I mean? Like, I love the people. I think it's thanks to them that we're there also. So I think that US is doing it really well because there's a lot to see. The sponsors are there, and then it's like everything just gets into place. It's like, okay, I'll give you tires, and then this, obviously, because there's a return. While here, there's no return. So it's like, okay, I give you money for the WRC, and what? Like, who watches WRC? I mean, Yeah. So it's kind of sad that it's like so controlled that it's almost impossible to enjoy. That's why I think that F1, obviously, you can see everything. You're there, you know, so it's completely different. I don't know. That would be a good idea.
It's really interesting, and you mentioned it here, because I'm curious to know how the US found you. Like when you came over, this ball of energy of... Because I kind of just feel like that's the kind of attitude, like you said, sponsors were hopefully very easy to get for you in that time. Was it more addictive going to the US and finding it easier there than it was to race here? And were there other distinct differences that you found between the two different championship styles?
Okay, so how I got to the US, it's a crazy story also. So it's like all happened because, okay, when I started working as driver instructor and I wasn't racing, I was living in this immigrant flat with my co-driver, and she was sharing with me the room. So I was like, we need to find a solution. We're never going to be able to race if we need to do something. And she was like, oh, you're the creative one. And I was like, yeah, of course, always my job. So one day I was sitting in my kitchen and I'm like, So she arrived and she's like, I know that face. So she sat down and she's like, go for it. And I'm like, okay, this is my idea. So I have 1,700 euros in my account. The next month, we're going to spend it all, like all of it. Ooh, crazy, 1,700. Like, and we're going to try and find sponsors. She's like, yeah, but what do you mean? I'm like, okay, every day we're going to wake up, sit on this table and send 40 emails.
Wow.
Otherwise, we can't get out from this table. She's like, okay, it's going to be fun. and I said, and then we're going to spend those 1,700 to try and do, like, for example, there was, Motorsport International.
Yep.
Okay, we can go to that. I know I have lots of contact because obviously I lived in Birmingham. So we can work at the stand in exchange of people like paying for our tickets and this and that. And then we can go, there was an event of driving in Portugal. Maybe there's people that are interested in sponsoring. We can go that. And then we went to Paris. And then we spent those 1,000. We went to Portugal hitchhiking. It's like insane. Like we did some crazy stuff, okay?
How are you still here?
So every day we would send 40 emails. So think about it. You're sitting there and there's a moment that you don't even have imagination anymore. And it's like, because you're sitting there, you're like, okay, excite, email. And then my energy, email. And then whatever you found on the table, you would just send email to that. What's the name of this table? It's like, okay, So anything and anyone. And it got to a point that I was opening, Facebook and whatever, and just scrolling through. And I found this email of this team that was doing like a selection of drivers. And I just sent to anyone. And apart from that, we were organizing all that. So we went to Portugal to this event. I called them. I said, hey, we're going to come. Is it possible to make a discount or something special? No, we can't pay your transport, but we can give you the course for free. I was like, yeah, perfect. Okay. So, like, okay, $100 here. And then we went to Paris because there was a startup company that was interested in investing. Obviously, it never worked out. Then to the Birmingham show, I worked as engineer in a stand for Supertech Performance in exchange that they paid our costs of everything. And then I was like, and I bring you a lady that is pretty and can stand there and work with me. And he was like, yeah, I like your deals. That's perfect. And I was like, great. And my co-driver was like, oh God, what I got into. So it was a crazy month, okay? And then the last thing of the month was Italy. I organized a rally with, I spoke directly to a company that apparently wanted to do a whole super cool project, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, we can come, but we have like zero money. So we have really, it was like right on the end, So they would pay for all the expenses, like the flight, and then they said, and then we would give you like 5,000 euros because you can wear the brand that whatever. And I was like, oh, perfect, great. So I'm like, okay, great, this is our last chance, everything's gonna be great. And it was a car brand, so it was pretty big, like, yeah. So we fly there. Oh, by the way, couch surfing? Okay, so I had one surfer that stayed at my house in Fuerteventura, and he was in the same place of the rally. So I contacted him. I'm like, hey, do you remember you stayed at my sofa? And he was like, oh, God. I'm like, I'm coming. And he was like, okay, sure. So we couch surfed at his house.
Oh, wow.
And then we went to this race. And then in the end, it was like all fake. Not fake, but like, yeah. So when I got there, I was supposed to race with a car. I can't say that because otherwise I'm going to say the brand. It's kind of ugly. But we were supposed to race. Imagine you're supposed to race with a Ford Fiesta ST, and suddenly it's a cube.
Oh,
Oh, no. Exactly.
That's
like
no
that.
good.
Yeah.
Wow, right.
So I was like, oh God, like what is this? Where did I get into? It was so bad. And it was the last chance we had. Like we had zero money. They weren't paying us the 5,000 that they promised. I even talked to the restaurants nearby, and I put their name on in exchange of having food for free. It was like crazy work to go to this like freaking thing, and then it was all a lie. And my co-driver was so over it. She was like, I'm not gonna do, like, this is too much for me. And it was the last day she was in the sofa of this guy, and she was watching Titanic, like crying, like my life is over, this and that. And by the way, meanwhile, I was replying all these 40 emails every time. Like someone answered, oh no thanks, I'm not interested, or oh yeah sure, let's talk about it. But you know how many people of the 40 per day would answer, yes we're interested, let's talk? Just thousands. So what happens is it was super late at night, and she was watching Titanic. I've never seen Titanic before, so I was just like, oh god, I'm gonna die. And all of a sudden my phone rings, and it's like a super long number, and I'm just like, huh? So I'm like, yes, let's go. And I'm like, yeah, and he's like, hello, my name is like very weird strong English, I'm like, he's like, yeah, we spoke on email, this and that, and I'm just like, who's this? I'm like, yeah, of course. Nice to talk to you again. And he was like, yeah, so about that driver selection, isn't it? And I was just like, yeah, sure. Where do you want me? Where can I come? He was like, next week is okay. I'm like, yeah, sure. How the heck? I don't even have the money to go back to my house. I'm just like, where is it? Where are we meeting? And he's like, LA? I was like, what? All this like at, super late in the morning. I'm just like, what just happened? And I'm just like, sure, see you there. And I put down the phone. I'm like, how the heck am I going to do this? And then he called me again. He said, oh, by the way, you come from so far away that we take care of the expenses. And I was like, oh my god. And then he's like, oh, by the way, too, so that you can have an extra ticket for your husband or your mother or your father, and I'm like, oh, thank you so much. And put down the phone, and I'm thinking, my dad doesn't talk to me since I raced, so not a good idea. My mom was scared of flying. My husband, probably never gonna happen. And I was like, my co-driver. So I start running in, I'm like, Lou, and she was like, crying, watching Titanic, like, no, not again. And I'm like, we're going to LA. It was hilarious.
She's just got over the fact that there was probably enough room on the door in that end scene, and now you've hit her with LA. LA. So what did you do in LA? You get to the airport. What were you driving?
Like I know, I didn't even know. Right. I was like, yes on the phone, and really in my head I was like, what? And I got there, and suddenly this like big monster buggies thing. I'm just like, and he was like, you drove this car every day, please. How do you start this? It was like insane, and yeah. And then we were in the desert of Mojave, in a scrapyard of planes.
Wow.
Jumping. How's it called?
Wings.
The wings. They put wings in the middle of the road, and they're like, jump it here and this. And I'm like, did someone test it? And they're like, you're testing it. Love America. And literally the funniest part is that so you understand why I got into this crazy team. There's a video of this, okay? So if you want to back up your story. I arrive, I'm like, I'll do the course just to see how it works, So I do one like really slow. It was like kind of a truck around those planes, I came back, I'm like, I can push it a little, no. And I'm like to my co-driver, ready? Yeah, have fun, okay. And I went, okay, this jump of the wing, and I'm like, full gas, no problem. Whee! And suddenly we're in the air, whee! And I'm like, eventually we're gonna get down, right? Wee, and then it just falls down, and there's a turn right there. So I'm like, oh, so I turn, and suddenly we're rolling and rolling and rolling. And my co-driver was shouting, we're never gonna get in this team. And I was like, how fun was that though? And basically everyone arrives, like there was a helicopter on top, that's why there was a video of this, everyone coming by, and then my future boss, he was like smashing on my, he was like, yeah, I like the attitude, that's good. I was like, go America. And he was like, can you roll on the other side for the video? It's like, sure. Was that serious? I think it was. Story of my life. 3 years in America and Mexico.
Me. Well, it's just, I'm overwhelmed.
Yes,
GZ,
this is an overwhelming story.
It's
I
literally
incredible.
feel like we could chat for 7 hours.
Yes.
And look, we probably will once this finishes.
Yes.
But let's fast forward a little bit to Extreme E, because obviously the Odyssey 21 is then a completely different car again, although it sounds like you're just, happy to pretend like you did.
Oh, you've driven it a million times before, right? You must have got the call. And
please, I had one in my house, in my garden.
Every day. Talk us through the process of when you first found out about Extreme E, how you entered the pool of drivers, and then driving for Excite alongside Ollie.
I don't know how this happened. I was like, I just saw this championship. I'm like, this is amazing. And obviously I saw Loeb and, Carlos Sainz and all that. And I was like, wow, it's like a dream. And then obviously they were looking for girls. So I'm like, I can just try, Of course, I was no one, but I'm like, well, I am no one. But I was like, I'm just going to text everyone. And yeah, and pretty much I kind of spoke to the guys of QEV. And they had a second team coming up, and it was exciting. And the guy was like, yeah, but they're looking for a big budget, this and that. And so it was a bit complicated. And then I'm like, yeah, I for sure cannot bring budget. I can bring you a lot of smiles and a lot of hard work. So I was like, so who's the driver? Let me talk to him. And I literally just contacted Ollie on Instagram. I'm like, hey Ollie, my name is Christina, I remember I got in your team, can we talk? And he probably was like, who is this chick? And then he called me and we spoke, and I'm like, I promise I'll work like harder than anyone else, and and that's what happened. And then they just called me and they're like, okay, let's try it.
Wow. And what was it like seeing the Odyssey 21 for the first time in person?
It was crazy. It was crazy. Like, I don't know. For me, I couldn't believe it. I was around all this situation with all these amazing people and amazing drivers, and I was like, pinch me. So it's really cool.
It feels like that for this championship, doesn't it? Because it is an absolute... And just sitting in the catering tent here, even for us, just looking around, as you said, you've got Seb over there and Johan, who's just won the the Rallycross World Championship, and Nico Rosberg, and all of these amazing names. And then you,
and then Chris, did you see running around?
Yeah, who was literally running around.
Yeah.
There is, I saw a reel of you running earlier to the crazy race, but for everything that you've done this year, and look, it's fair to probably say that Excite hasn't had the best luck. But for someone who, yes, has to work incredibly hard, and you have had to do that all season, the combination with what we saw in qualifying your lap and how you... I'm just thinking about you jumping this buggy over this plane wing and then thinking about the knife edge down the bottom of this track. And now I know, going through your head, you're like, I don't care. Here I go. Because it just bloody looked awesome. How was it then getting control of this car? Because, it's electric, so had you driven anything electric before?
Just the road cars like Taycan and stuff like that, because when I work with Porsche,
yes.
But that's it. And it was, it's very different.
And in terms of off-road then, and how that's, the power's delivered, how does it feel differently to an R2 car or a four-wheel drive petrol car?
Obviously it's completely different because it's a SUV, so it's more like, you have to compare it to a big off-road car. You can't compare it to an R2, but the weight and how everything works, it's completely different. But at the end, when you're driving, it's pretty much the same. So you don't, obviously I miss the sound and then you can hear other noises like the dampers and this, you're not used to that. So it's very different on that side. But the car, it's like a radical Dakar car, 500 kilowatts. So it's badass. But I feel that in the end, the driving is pretty much just driving.
How did the first meeting with Sebastian Loeb go? Surely you had to go and say hello to him, didn't you?
I played it safe, who's this so high? Yeah. No.
Who's this?
No, I met him in Dakar in Peru.
Oh,
and so you see me, I am never speechless. And the guy that was working with me, he came, he was in Peru, and he was like, Christina, I've never seen you speechless in your life. And I saw him and I was like, giving the hand, he was like, hi, nice to meet you. That was it. So that was the first time I saw him, and when I saw him again here, he's such a nice, humble guy and super easy. That is all of them. It's impossible not to. Or Button is my favorite guy on the world. Now that I met him, is so cool. Mm-hmm. That is just, it's amazing, to be here. It's like a big family.
And that's what we've noticed as well, is that the service park is incredibly friendly. And even after the action in qualifying and semi-finals and races through the previous couple of rounds, everyone gets together afterwards and it's one big happy family.
Yeah, party on Santa Elena.
Right, I was going to say, is it because everyone's going back to the ship, or is it because genuinely everyone realizes that they're here for something slightly bigger than just winning the championship?
I think it's a bit of both, for sure. To me, it never happened that I shared a room with a competitor, and right now Laia is one of my best friends, so it's really cool that then you just go back and you're all together, and racism is one thing and then the rest is another, so it's nice to separate things.
Yeah, and it seems fairly easy to be able to do that, doesn't it? Even when there's big drama like there was in Sardinia with Andretti United and X44, and whilst there was a little bit of tension there, it seemed like it just rolled over very quickly, and the Andretti United team tried to help out X44, and everyone tried to apologise to each other pretty quickly. It just seems unusual, but in a really positive way, because not only that it's a championship about bringing awareness to climate change and sustainability diversity, of course, but you guys are all leaders and role models in your own right. And I know that, you know, one of your things is always staying positive. How do you think that impacts then the next generation? Because not only young women, but young men as well, and looking at how this is really equal in every way, and look at your performances, and you're bloody quick out there, and quicker than a lot of the other guys as well.
Yeah, no, like you said, I think it's great. It's great to be part of this. It's great to be able to show and explain everyone, and it's great to be part of the new era, because everything's starting now, I feel, and we're just like, we're in here at the beginning, so it's super cool. And I was telling Carlos Duarte, because I love him, he's amazing, like, sometimes, you know, he has so much information that we, like, I told it, like, normal people, we have no idea what's really going on. So when we were in Sardinia, for example, like, who expected to have, like, something extreme happening in Sardinia, you know? And, you know, the wildfire was pretty bad situation. Yeah. So he was explaining me, and I'm like, you know, I feel that I'm, like, the translator to the normal, you know? Yeah. So it's like with our social media, we can try and explain what's happening in an easy way so that people can actually, I'm watching racing at the same time I'm understanding what's happening, what's going on, and how I can give my little, you know, like, hint or help. So it's super cool, yeah. And I think that with the social media we can do so much, you know, and it's increasing each time. So
that positive message is so much a part of Extreme E that you've touched on. It's really the reason why we're here, is trying to bring attention to climate change. We've been to 5 locations over the course of 2021. Sardinia was one of them, wildfires in particular. At the moment, we are in the UK, where we're talking about biodiversity. What do you feel like you've learned most of all from these 5 races in terms of that sustainability message? What's something that you think most people maybe wouldn't have known had it not been for these races?
No, I mean, I feel that I've learned to get better at some things. Like, they're really tiny things. Like, for example, you know, when you brush your teeth and you don't close the water because you're just like, I'm brushing it. No. Now, you know, I kind of think more. I'm a little bit more aware of things around me. Or like when I drink something, I'm thinking, okay, I have to throw it in there because that's plastic, and this is, you know, before maybe it wasn't that in my head all the time. So I feel that this happened to me, and I think it's happening to other people, because I receive a lot of messages on Instagram like, oh my god, really, this is like this, I will try and do this. Or like, you know, when we did the Count Us In challenge,
yes,
it was so cool, because a lot of people were like, oh yeah, I'll go skating too to work now because you said that. And so it's so cool, you know, to try and I feel that that's the main thing that I've learned, like more than actual scientific things of like how it's melting the ice in Greenland, you know, that's crazy also, but I think that's more the learning of how to try and do a little step towards it.
You've spent so much of your life, your career, fighting for yourself, obviously, to keep your career moving along. But now you are a leader for people who don't know you or don't even know motorsport so well. They obviously would follow Extreme E, dare I say, so they know a little bit about motorsport. Does that register with you, the idea that you're now someone people look up to, not necessarily just for sport, but because you're able to translate some of these messages for them in a way that they can process?
I mean, I like that. That sounds really beautiful. I don't think so. I am yet. I mean, I hope one day to be able to, you know, teach much more and show much more. But I mean, right now I just do what I can, and I'm very focused on the racing. And next year, hopefully, is going to be amazing. And you know, I just try to go towards that. And meanwhile, if I can show what I've learned, that's good.
It is really important the way that Extreme E is allowing people to get that message out. I mean, it's been an incredible story. We've had an incredible hour here. I feel
sorry.
like I feel like we were meant to go for less than this, and I'm very pleased that we went for longer.
Incredible,
because there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe this will be the part 2 of the podcast next year.
I'll tell you the insights now, the jail and all that.
Yes. Well, look,
in Mexico,
we'll turn this off and then get the real juicy parts. But Christine GZ, an absolute legend. Like, it has been an absolute pleasure to sit here and chat with you. Hopefully, you've enjoyed listening to this at home. Go and follow GZ on Instagram. That's probably the first place, and then you can find out more about what's happening in the world of Count Us In Challenge, of course, and all the other Extreme E initiatives. And I'll leave you with this thought, Christine: gumboots. Wellies. They're
No.
waterproof. And your experience with
You guys
them,
are not nice. They
It
told
was-
me the name was Willy's. I asked a VIP guest the other night, "How's your Willy?" Seriously.
I feel like you're set up for real failure there. I mean,
feel like-
wellies.
Yes.
I feel like
That's not fair.
we should
Yeah,
That's
not
mean.
fair.
we should launch an
Yes.
off-track investigation
Yeah.
as to who led you down that path.
Yeah, exactly.
But the sheer joy on your face when you jumped
Yes.
into the water next to the beaver house
I
that
was so
everyone had
happy.
just built. You and Utah. That was actually, it's one of my
Yes.
favorite moments of the last couple of days. Christine GZ, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
and
for
we will
having
chat
me.
for part 2 in the podcast in 2022.
Bye. Gracias.
Terrific to chat to Christine GZ during her time, of course, at the end of her career of Excite Energy Racing, now moving on to Veloce Racing for 2022. The career continues. And my goodness, does that mean we're going to have several more hours of podcast
yes.
chats? I can only imagine,
yes.
because I don't even feel like we scratched the surface really in that hour.
No, bring it on. Can confirm also the tow truck does look incredibly bad in the photos that I've seen. And the Corolla, the rally car, looks incredibly awesome. Certainly worth going over to
I love a Corolla.
GZ's social. Yes, maybe you could paint yours, Michael, in a similar way that she
maybe.
painted her VW. But yeah, go over to GZ's socials. But look, a massive thank you also has to be said to Excite Energy Racing for setting up both Ollie's chat and, of course, GZ's chat. A really, really great team. And we had some incredible times with them over the Jurassic X Prix as well. So thank you to them. And thank you to you for listening. It is so good to be doing this podcast. Still, we love it. Now, listen, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving a rating and review. It all helps, as we all know. But it's so cool to be talking to some amazing drivers, of course, as we hurtle so close, Michael, to the beginning of season 2 in Saudi.
Hurtle really makes it sound like it's out of control, doesn't it?
It's like the knife edge.
It's the knife edge, yes.
Yes.
Although in control, that was in control. That's all very good. Yes, only a couple of weeks till we get to Saudi Arabia. Really, very, very soon it will be upon us. Before that, though, we do have more chats coming your way, including, you may remember from the past year, her great stories aboard the St. Helena, the boat that was carrying all of Extreme E around. It's Izzy. You can follow her on Instagram. You can go back and relive her entire, year, pretty much the full year on the boat, wasn't it? Doing the full circuit on the St. Helena. She said some great information, some great stories, not only the people on the boat, but the broader message of climate change, including COP26, of course, last year. You can go and follow her, but we caught up with her to get the inside line on what it was like to spend all that time on a boat and the stuff she'd learned and seen. I mean, it's a pretty incredible story in its own to spend that much time at sea, and that too will be a great chat coming your way in a couple of weeks.
Yep, it's amazing to see what just goes on behind the scenes of Extreme E. Of course, drivers, teams, fantastic, but being able to take a little bit of a look on the broader picture, and of course in our chat with Alejandro's, we know that his wife wasn't totally stoked at his purchase of this boat, then to being able to see what it was like. We were very lucky enough, and a massive thank you to Izzy as well, to be shown around the boat whilst we were in Dorset, or ship, because we'll be in trouble now for saying boat so many times. It's incredible. But look, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to you, Michael, as well, for all of these interviews that we've done in the past, but still currently.
Yes.
And we hope that you've enjoyed this and enjoy Extreme E. You can find out more, of course, about Extreme E and where to find Michael and myself in the links in the description below. But it is time to say goodbye. We'll see you in a fortnight's time for our chat with Izzy.
See you then.